Before the first shots rang out, 5RR stepped into a scene filled with political strife, logistical messiness, and complicated moral choices. Helicopters tumbled from the sky, orders clashed among leaders, and the battalion had to quickly learn the ways of jungle warfare. This is their story of adaptation, resilience, and how they set the benchmark for modern counterinsurgency. The battalion headquarters staff officers, primarily in charge of operational planning and supporting the commanding officer in all aspects of the 5th Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment, were Major Max Carroll, the operations officer, and Captain Peter Isaacs, his deputy, and also the battalion's adjutant. In this chapter, they recount how 5RAR dove into the action and began the steep learning curve that faced everyone in the battalion. Max Carroll shared that 5RR was fully assembled on the ground in Vung Tau by May 13, 1966. The battalion advance party, which I was part of as the officer commanding support company, and the battalion operations officer, arrived on April 20, 1966. We were taken under the wing of our sister battalion, 1RR, part of the U.S. 173 Airborne Brigade based in Bien Hoa, where we spread out to learn the ropes. This connection proved invaluable, allowing me to meet the brigade headquarters staff I would soon be working with, and to fly along with the 2nd 503 Airborne Infantry Regiment on a helicopter assault and follow-up ground sweep through War Zone D, north of Phuoc Tuy. Our American allies generously shared their first-hand knowledge of conducting battalion-level operations. Though our operational styles differed, they respected the professionalism of the Australian Army, both from their time with 1RAR and the high regard for the Australian Army Training Team Vietnam. The assistance from the U.S. Army continued in Vung Tau, where the 68 Assault Helicopter Company provided us with excellent training in key techniques for infantry helicopter insertions and assaults, helicopter resupply, and swift aeromedical evacuation of casualties. They also took many of our officers on reconnaissance missions over Phuoc Tuy Province, an area we would soon know very well. Additionally, the 173 Airborne Brigade welcomed captains. Peter Isaacs and Brian Ledan are set to join the HQ of the 1st Battalion, 503 Airborne Infantry Regiment for an upcoming operation. The final group of 5 RAR troops that were heading to South Vietnam landed at Saigon's Tan Son Nhut Airport on a Qantas charter flight in mid-May 1966. Major Stan Maisie, the battalion's second-in-command, and I were part of this last group. A few hours later, I found myself sitting on a box in the tent I would share with my assistant adjutant, Lieutenant Ralph Thompson. He brought me up to speed on everything that had taken place over the past month, as the battalion arrived by both air and sea. Having served as the battalion's adjutant for the last 16 months, and often being at the center of things, I felt a bit overwhelmed. This feeling didn't last long, as there was a great deal of work to do before the battalion was ready to head to its operational area in Phuoc Tuy Province. Part of that work included our initial exposure to combat during an air reconnaissance mission, where all 4 helicopters carrying our reconnaissance team came under fire. We responded with great enthusiasm. From the moment I became adjutant, I was committed to making my role primarily operational rather than focused on personnel management and administration, which had been the main responsibility of adjutants in the Army's earlier Pentropic infantry battalions. I was fortunate to have a reliable assistant adjutant, an exceptionally skilled chief clerk in Staff Sergeant Merv Friedolf, and an experienced orderly room sergeant, Sergeant John Lehman. My main responsibility was as assistant operations officer and deputy to the operations officer, who also led the support company. My job involved managing the battalion command post and organizing all air support operations, including helicopter movements and offensive air support. To prepare for our tasks, Brian Ledan, the signals officer and commander of the deployed BHQ group, and I were attached to the 173 Airborne Brigade for a 2-battalion air assault into Phuoc Tuy Province. The 1st Australian Task Force was set to establish its presence there about a week later. We met up with the 1503 at Bien Hoa Air Base just before dawn, having spent the night prior to the operation with 1RR, which was getting ready to return home after its 12-month tour of duty, part of 173 Airborne Brigade. The 3-day operation was intense and thrilling. We flew south in a fleet of helicopters, landing in an assembly area near our supporting artillery battalion. Then we took off with an assaulting rifle company into the designated landing zone, supported by airstrikes, artillery fire, and the heavy machine guns and rockets from our helicopter gunship teams. Surprisingly, there was no resistance. This marked the second time that the 173 Airborne Brigade conducted search and destroy missions in the province to pave the way for the arrival of 1 ATF. During this round of fierce engagements, we dealt significant blows to the Viet Cong. By the end of the operation, they had suffered 8 fatalities and 23 injuries. Brian and I were stationed at the 1503's base headquarters, closely observing how Lieutenant Colonel Code and his staff coordinated operations during various encounters with the Viet Cong. During one intense moment, 4 rounds of friendly artillery mistakenly hit B Company, resulting in American casualties. Despite the chaos, there was no sign of panic, even when we learned that VC were reported near the base headquarters perimeter on our first night. The following morning, we discovered a large Chinese-made command-detonated mine just outside the perimeter, which, thankfully, had not detonated. Upon returning to Vung Tau, we shifted to preparing for our airborne assault into LZ Hudson. Max Carroll. The combat experience for 5RR kicked off when we were placed under the command of the 173 Airborne Brigade on May 24, 1966. The brigade was engaged in Operation Hardihood, aimed at inserting 1 ATF into Phuoc Tuy Province. The first phase of this operation involved the Vietnamese authorities relocating all residents from within a 4,000-meter radius of Nui Dat, designated as 1 ATF's base area, though they only managed to do this partially. The second phase, which included the 173 Airborne Brigade and us, focused on clearing the vicinity around 1 ATF's future base of any enemy presence. The brigade, excluding 5RR, carried out a helicopter assault on LZ Hudson, located a couple of thousand meters north of the Nui Dat Hill, on May 17, 1966. This provided us, 5RR, with a secure landing zone for our helicopter insertion. Our American counterparts faced significant challenges before we arrived. On their first day, the 1503 endured intense combat, resulting in 12 killed and 35 wounded. By May 21, 1966, the brigade's losses climbed to 19 killed and 75 wounded. The losses kept mounting. As we were landing, clearing the fiercely contested village of Long Phuoc, the 2503 suffered another 19 killed and 90 wounded. It's not commonly known just how many casualties the 173 Airborne Brigade endured to establish our presence, all before we had fired a shot. This was the largely overlooked backdrop to the 1 ATF's deployment in Phuoc Tuy Province. At this point in my account, I should mention that the operations of the 5RR from May to August 1966 are already thoroughly documented in Bob O'Neill's Vietnam Task, as well as those of the 5RR and 6RR in Ian McNeil's official history to Long Tan. So, I won't reiterate their excellent work, but rather intend to share insights from my personal experience, adding depth to their narratives of this time. Our arrival at LZ Hudson went off without a hitch, and our companies quickly moved into their designated search areas. We were eager to get our people away from LZ Hudson since it was congested with brigade headquarters and support elements, along with the operations fire base. By early afternoon, our battalion command group relocated to a predetermined spot that allowed us to better oversee our mobile units. On that first day, we had several brief, inconclusive encounters with the VC, keeping everyone on high alert. On the evening of May 24, 1966, our first day of operations, we suffered our first casualty, Private Errol Nowak. Over the next 10 days, we advanced further east, engaging with and killing VC without further losses on our side. The enemies we faced were what we called local forces, and it appeared that the D445 Provincial Mobile Battalion, which had engaged heavily with the 1503 and 2503, had retreated to safer areas to regroup. While our American colleagues endured losses, they dealt significant damage to the VC, especially at the villages of Long Tan and Long Phuoc. Peter Isaacs has a notable recollection of an incident from this time that merits attention. Peter remembers that while we were with the 173rd Airborne Brigade, one of our companies had a contact just before night fell and captured two severely injured VC. The company commander decided against calling for their evacuation, knowing it would compromise his company's position for the night. Both VC succumbed during the night. The next day, Brigadier General Smith, the commander of the 173rd Brigade, visited our base. He pulled our CO, Lieutenant Colonel John Warr, aside and stated that as long as 5RR was under his command, we would treat VC casualties just like our own wounded. This was an unexpected reprimand from a general of an army often viewed as ruthless in pursuit of body count. I want to clarify and expand on Peter's account. Ultimately, I made the decision not to evacuate the VC casualties. After closely questioning Major Bert Cassidy, the OC of A Company, I learned that the VC were gravely injured, unconscious, and near death. Given that it was dark, I wasn't willing to risk a dust-off helicopter and its crew for dying VC, even though I would have for our own personnel. Another crucial factor was that the VC did not respect the Red Cross and fired at all low-flying aircraft. Additionally, calling in a dust-off would have revealed a company's location, requiring lights to bring in the helicopter. I instructed Bert to keep the casualties comfortable with morphine until they passed. I later updated John Warr on my decision, and while he reluctantly agreed, he accepted General Smith's reprimand for it. I had a deep respect for General Smith. He was a capable commander. Still, I believe that under the circumstances, my decision was the right one. The safety and security of our troops and allies were my priorities. After addressing the situation about enemy casualties, General Smith pointed to his map and said, "Colonel, there's a VC battalion over there. Go get them." Nearby, Brigadier David Jackson, commander of the 1ATF, overheard this and pulled John Warr aside, warning him not to engage with a VC battalion. Our A Company was close to the location indicated by the 173 Brigade commander. Max Carroll promptly directed OCA Company, Bert Cassidy, to move quickly. Bert was apparently in the middle of lunch when the resupply finished. He left his meal behind as a company took off at full speed. To add to Peter's account of this incident, this serves as a prime example of the chain of command issues John Warr faced during that period. While we were under the 173 Airborne Brigade, General Smith served as our operational commander. Yet, Brigadier Jackson, the commander of 1ATF, held the national interests close, especially as we were set to revert to his command just a few days later. The recent political concerns, especially after the first casualty, Private Errol Nowak, would surely weigh on Brigadier Jackson's mind when he spoke to John Warr. On June 2, 1966, 5R began focusing on what would become the 1ATF base area at Nui Dat. The next phase of Operation Hardihood kicked off on June 3rd, and we established a temporary defensive position around Nui Dat. By June 5th, we had set up a patrol screen to cover the incoming units from 1ATF coming from Vung Tau. That same day, HQ 1ATF took over the area from HQ 173 Airborne Brigade. We, 5RR, were the only Australian infantry battalion present, since 6RR was still preparing at Vung Tau after arriving from Australia, leaving our companies quite dispersed. Then, on June 8th, 173 Airborne Brigade moved forward to conduct Operation Hollandia in the Long High Hills, extending from 10 kilometers south of Nui Dat to the southern coast of Phuoc Tuy. This left us on our own. We pressed on with an intense schedule of aggressive patrolling and night ambushes to assert control over our lightly held area. It was a tense time. The VC took note of the departure of 173 Airborne Brigade, and for several nights, they probed our widely scattered company perimeters with reconnaissance patrols, trying to gather intel on our positions, especially the locations of our machine guns. These patrols operated with professionalism, clearly from an enemy more capable than any we had faced before. We braced for a heavy attack since Allied intelligence had informed HQ-1 ATF about the VC's intentions. But for reasons unknown to us then, the anticipated assault never materialized. Later, during an operation in October 1966, we captured documents revealing more about their plans. It was confirmed that the VC Main Force 274 Regiment was indeed planning to attack us in June. They had positioned themselves near Nuige, about 6 kilometers northwest of Nui Dat, while their patrols were scouting our positions. However, on June 9, 1966, a U.S. light observation aircraft supporting us vanished on its way back to Bien Hoa. We were assigned to have a company on standby for the crew's assistance, but aerial searches along their flight path found no sign of the missing bird dog, so our company never deployed. Captured documents later indicated that the VC-274 regiment had shot down the aircraft. The enemy commander believed it would be more advantageous to set an ambush around the wreck and destroy the rescue team rather than attack our rapidly growing base. Perhaps we were fortunate to find the crash site 6 months later, when A Company, under my command at the time, discovered the aircraft and the crew's remains. With a noticeable increase in enemy presence in Phuoc Tuy evident in early June, 6RR was rushed to join us on June 14th, a week ahead of schedule. Their arrival marked the end of Operation Hardihood. We were relieved to see 6RR arrive, as it allowed us to reorganize our companies into our final defensive position at the newly established 1ATF base and share the patrolling duties. Our personnel were wearing down from 3 weeks of relentless, rigorous operations without any break. When not on patrol or conducting night ambushes, the priority was digging in and constructing our base. This work had to be done by hand with the field tools we had, due to the lack of engineering support for earth-moving machinery at that time. During this period, the unceasing heavy monsoon rains turned the area into a quagmire of deep, sticky red mud. Everyone was constantly damp from rain or sweat, and clothing and boots began to deteriorate quickly. The huchis, or one-man shelters, that each soldier carried offered barely enough protection from the rain while trying to sleep. These conditions, paired with the monotonous U.S. combat rations, started to take their toll, and we became lean and mean. We were glad to see our administrative unit arrive from Vung Tau. They completed our setup on the ground and brought essential equipment we needed to establish ourselves. We received crucial supplies like barbed wire, steel pickets, sandbags, and other defense materials, followed by marquee tents to shelter kitchens and quartermaster stores. Later, accommodation tents arrived, much to our frustration, without their wooden poles. The initial logistical support for our deployment faced serious issues, worsened by appalling trade union sabotage at the Australian wharves. Throughout June, 5RR engaged with the VC and faced casualties while patrolling the approaches to the task force base, but we maintained a favorable casualty ratio. We also worked on fortifying our own base area. Additionally, we had to keep one company on standby as 1ATF's immediate reserve and another company to secure 6RR's base area while they undertook Operation Inaugura, which involved searching Long Phuoc village and dismantling a vast tunnel system. It was a perilous mission, and 6R ultimately leveled the village. During our year of operations, neither battalion had a moment of rest. When one was conducting operations, the other had to stay at Nui Dat for base protection and construction. It was clear that a 3rd battalion was necessary for 1ATF, but none could be provided until December 1967, when we finally received a 3rd battalion along with a squadron of Centurion tanks. In the meantime, we pressed on despite being stretched thin. Another issue that arose, unresolved before we left Australia, was a shortage of M60 general-purpose machine guns. When the unit was all together at the base, the number of guns was adequate. However, once we left for battalion-sized operations, most M60s went with the combat troops, leaving the base without proper machine gun defense. We had been calling for additional weapons for base defense for months, but to no avail. Survival dictated that we take matters into our own hands. Our resourceful battalion second in command, Major Stan Maisie, an exceptional entrepreneur, along with his hand-picked talented team, known as the Scrounger Platoon, managed to acquire several 30-caliber Browning light machine guns and 50-caliber Browning heavy machine guns, along with around 50,000 rounds of ammunition from an American source. We placed the larger weapons in crucial bunkers along our perimeter, while the smaller ones were mounted on vehicles. This extra firepower significantly improved the morale and security of those who stayed back at base during operations. Eventually, the theater increment got the green light, and we received more M60s, but we held on to the 50 caliber HMGs and handed them over to 7 RAR when they took over from us in May 1967. While the Army's logistics system was still figuring itself out, Stan and his team managed to find many essential items for our base security, including telephones, switchboards, radios, and even a US 2.5-ton six-wheel drive truck. We also left these items for 7RR. The rest of the month kept me busy as I was coordinating our patrols and ambushes, developing my own support company base area, and working with the CO on plans for our next operation. This operation was set to follow 6RAR's scheduled return to Nui Dat on July 5, 1966, after they completed Operation Inaugura. There was no slowing down in the pace of task force operations, as we left the base on July 6 to begin Operation Sydney, which would last until July 17, 1966. Our mission was to clear and extend the 1 ATF-controlled area to the north and northwest, including Nui A. This feature, located about 6 kilometers northwest of Nui Dat, was a striking jungle-covered hill with multiple ridges, rising around 160 meters above the surrounding flatland and spanning about 1.5 square kilometers. It dominated the landscape for several kilometers in every direction, but had not been cleared of VC during Operation Hardihood. We were entering unknown enemy territory, so we were ready for challenges. Our planning for Operation Sydney was meticulous, given the vast area we needed to cover and the diverse terrain that required careful monitoring for signs of enemy activity. While we expected to face local and district VC units, we couldn't rule out encounters with the main force battalions of the 274 and 275 regiments. It was crucial that our companies could support each other in case one ran into trouble, but the significant barrier of Nui could complicate this. Additionally, some of the areas we planned to enter were at the outer limits for our supporting artillery. The CO and I dedicated a lot of time to tackling these challenges, starting with personal aerial observations. We began with reconnaissance and assigned ground patrols to explore the areas we needed to cover. Our focus was on identifying potential artillery fire support bases and suitable routes for armored personnel carriers. Next, we performed the traditional military assessment, known as an appreciation of the situation. I found John War to be a straightforward and effective leader. He possessed a sharp mind and a strong tactical approach, quickly evaluating the ideas I presented before sharing his outlined plan. My role was to dive into the specifics and create a draft operation order, which War reviewed and approved. In this case, we set up our battalion headquarters alongside a fire support base codenamed Tennis. FSB Tennis was situated a few kilometers northwest of our task force base, providing artillery fire support to our northernmost units that might need to move beyond the range of the 1 ATF guns at Nui Dat. From FSB Tennis, our direct support artillery, the 105 Field Battery, was well positioned to assist our companies at the outer edges of their assigned search areas. We also had a reserve company at FSB Tennis, along with an APC troop of 12 tracked armored vehicles, ready to respond quickly if any of the searching companies encountered difficulties. The anti-tank platoon and pioneer platoon were also stationed at FSB Tennis to safeguard the guns and HQ, should the reserve company be needed to support the searching units. Bob O'Neill wrote about this successful operation in his book, Vietnam Task. There's not much to add, aside from noting the tragic loss of a good soldier due to friendly fire. Our supporting gunners consistently performed well. Their control and accuracy were always impressive. Unfortunately, during this occasion, the target was atop Nui A. For reasons known only to artillerymen, 3 rounds in a 6-round salvo went high, cleared the crest of Nui A, and sadly struck C Company's 9 platoon, resulting in the death of one of their soldiers. We were outraged and deeply affected, and our gunners were devastated, leading to an investigation. Enemy ground fire had targeted a Sioux helicopter from the summit of Nui A, and clearance had been given to engage that target with artillery from the task force base at Nui Dat. 1 round of fire for effect was launched simultaneously from each of the 6 guns in the tasked battery. 3 of these shells overshot the intended target and landed in the area occupied by C Company. 1 round hit a tree near 9 platoon, scattering deadly shrapnel and resulting in the death of Lance Corporal Marinko Tich Tomas. Artillery fire control procedures mandated that the positions of nearby friendly forces must be confirmed before firing clearance was granted. Unfortunately, C Company's location had been misinterpreted at the battery headquarters due to a misreading of a signaler's handwriting in a logbook. This mistake erroneously placed C Company 600 meters further east, far from the threat of the fire mission. Had C Company's position been accurately interpreted, clearance to fire would not have been issued. The details of this incident can be clarified through Maps 5 and 5A. In warfare, such occurrences can result from various factors, or, as in this instance, a brief oversight by a team of committed professionals under pressure. Thankfully for 5RR, these events were uncommon. During Operation Sydney, it became evident that we needed to address the situation in the village of Dukmi, located on the northeastern edge of our search area. We understood that most of the villagers were forcibly relocated, montagnards, gathered from throughout Phuoc Tuy in a poorly managed attempt by the South Vietnamese government at population control. These people, originally from the hill tribes of central Vietnam, held a deep mistrust of the government and were susceptible to the influence of the Viet Cong, VC. We were also aware that there was a local VC squad of about 15 members in Duc My, tasked with keeping the population in check and extorting taxes and food from the already struggling residents. A key principle of counterinsurgency warfare is to isolate the civilian population from enemy domination and pave the way for the restoration of government authority. We recognize this as a prime opportunity to put that principle into action by eliminating the VC presence in the village. With this goal in mind, the commanding officer sought and received approval from the commander of 1 ATF to extend our current operation for several days to carry out a cordon and search of Duc My on the night of July 19, 1966. This extension was designated as Operation Sydney II. At that point, cordon and search operations had yet to be executed at the battalion level in Vietnam. Certainly. Here's the paraphrased text. Allied forces of that size typically didn't operate at night, but the VC certainly did. What we were about to embark on was unprecedented in Vietnam. My understanding of the situation was limited. Back at Staff College in 1965, we had briefly touched upon this topic, discussing the various challenges involved. Both the instructors and the students recognized that it was a tough tactical endeavor. John War had extensively researched the matter and understood what was needed from his battalion. With great interest, we began our preliminary map study, aerial reconnaissance, and conducted our usual military analysis of the situation. Consequently, we determined that a ground reconnaissance was essential to validate the approach routes we had chosen for the battalion to move in under the cover of darkness and establish a cordon before the village realized what was happening. This operation was intricate, and we aimed to simplify the final plan as much as possible. As often occurs when delving into the specifics, we identified issues that necessitated some compromises. A stream flowed through the village from northeast to southwest, leading toward our position at FSB Tennis. This seemed like a solid directional reference for our nighttime approach to the south side of the village, allowing our companies to split off to their assigned cordon spots. However, a night reconnaissance patrol, including all 4 rifle company second-in-commands, found this route unsuitable, so we had to rethink our strategy. The village houses were scattered across the western side of Route 2 in an area roughly 600 meters square. We had to thoughtfully consider how to allocate troops for each designated task. At that time, 5RR could deploy around 550 men in the field. We decided to position 2 platoons from each company along the cordon in a line, with soldiers in pairs every 20 meters. The 3rd platoon would be held back at a depth of around 70 meters for rear security. Each company could cover about 450 meters of the cordon, and even with all 4 companies involved, we couldn't secure the entire village. Hence, we concluded that some of the outer houses would have to be left out. In broad terms, our final plan was for 3 companies to advance at night to a position behind their intended cordon, with C Company coming from the west, while B and D companies, The commanding officer's team came in from the east, with all three companies preparing to advance to their final cordon positions and connect with one another at first light. A Company, along with the battalion headquarters, two mortar sections, and the anti-tank platoon, all in APCs, were set to close in from the south at the last moment. Acting as the battalion reserve while mounted, A Company then dismounted and quickly moved to their cordon position on the south flank, while the anti-tank platoon took over as the reserve. We had A Company securing the south, B Company handling the east, C Company on the west, and D Company temporarily covering the north in the younger rubber trees until the APC troop arrived. D Company then stepped up as the search company for the village. Everything went smoothly, with some thrilling moments. During their night approach, the lead soldier from D Company, Private Fred Clark, fell 10 meters down an old well in complete darkness. After being quietly and safely pulled up with toggle ropes, D Company continued their covert insertion. Once the cordon was tight, several skirmishes broke out as the VC tried to flee. We managed to clear the area without sustaining any losses ourselves, even as we encountered enemy fatalities, injuries, and captures. Maintaining good fire discipline was crucial to protect civilians, and our well-planned rules of engagement outlined before the operation were strictly followed. After clearing the village and screening the residents, we provided civil affairs assistance, including medical and dental care, which left a positive impression on the villagers. Our troops were firm yet friendly and respectful, so they were welcomed warmly. We withdrew from the village on the afternoon of July 20th, 1966, to conduct clearing operations in the surrounding areas, where we killed one VC and wounded another before settling in defensively with separate company groups. We also set up 4 overnight ambushes on likely routes to the village to intercept any VC attempting to return. During company sweeps on July 21st and 26th, we took down another VC and wounded 2. One escaped while the other was captured. The commanding officer then secured task force approval for C and D companies to stay in the area for an extra day, as the rest of the battalion withdrew to Nui. We were set to relieve 6R for their Operation Hobart, which was due to kick off on July 24th. Meanwhile, 1 ATF operations continued to ramp up without any signs of slowing down. We felt quite pleased with Operations Sydney and Sydney 2, both of which were successful. Operation Sydney 2 marked the first of 9 cordon and search operations that 5RR executed during our year in Vietnam. We learned valuable lessons from each operation and steadily improved our approach. Our techniques eventually became standard procedures within 1 ATF. John War authored an excellent piece for the Australian Army Journal, published in November 1967, called Cordon and Search Operations in Phuoc Tuy Province, which can be found in Appendix C. His work significantly shaped the development of Australian Army doctrine on counter-revolutionary warfare. After the success of Operation Sydney 2, the commanding officer was eager to launch another operation, targeting the larger complex at Bin Ba. The task force commander agreed, but 6 RAR had priority for their next mission. From July 24th onward, we had to supply 1 company to protect their operational fire support base, as well as another company to secure 6 RAR's base area at Nui Dat, plus 1 more as 1 ATF's immediate reserve. We were becoming accustomed to these kinds of scenarios. However, things shifted when 6 RAR ran into trouble, leading to the need for a second company from us to join them. Our troops remained under 6 RAR's command until the entire force was called back to base due to reports of a serious enemy threat emerging to the west. Our B Company, along with the anti-tank platoon, was then sent to investigate a report of a sizable enemy accumulation. They returned late on July 31st, having discovered a 2-day-old, company-sized VC camp. D Company of 6RR conducted a similar patrol to the northeast, returning on August 2nd with nothing noteworthy to report. Determining the accuracy of reports on VC movements from Vietnamese sources and other allies posed a real challenge for our intelligence team at that time. Still, we couldn't proceed until the situation became clearer, so we dedicated time to planning and were well prepared to launch Operation Holsworthy, the cordon in search of Bin Ba. Thanks to the lessons learned from our dress rehearsal at Duc Mi, We were far better equipped to handle the much larger area of Binba and the nearby hamlet of Duc Trung, which had a total population of about 2,000. We had the assignment to return to Duc Mai, which led us to undertake a two-phased operation that went smoothly, with just a couple of minor issues. Under our command were 2 companies from the 6th RAR, along with troops from various combat arms and support units, both Australian and American. This included air support, interpreters, and Vietnamese police. The success of the operation showed that we had effectively coordinated all elements, achieving a commendable level of teamwork. Our initial reconnaissance started on August 5th, when C Company set up a patrol base southwest of Binba. During the night of August 5th and 6th, reconnaissance patrols evaluated potential assembly areas, routes, and timings. On August 7th, the company commander issued orders, and at 8 the next morning, Captain Peter Isaacs left with a team of company guides to map out and secure the assembly area for the 5 rifle companies and battalion headquarters, who were approaching the cordon area from the west. B Company was advancing separately from the east. I was in charge of marking out the battalion's assembly area to the southwest of Binba village. A 15-man team, made up of platoon guides from both the 5 RAR and 6 RR cordon companies, set off 90 minutes ahead of the rest of the battalion and headed north toward our target. I felt quite exposed, armed only with my shepherd's crook and a 9mm pistol, and I wasn't thrilled when I was handed an 81mm mortar round to carry as we left our base. Nothing happened until we reached the edge of a track near the assembly area. The lead scout signaled quietly that he spotted what he thought were 4 VC approaching on the track. I silently ordered an immediate ambush, drew my pistol, and cocked it. By this time, the battalion was trailing behind us like a long snake, and encountering even a small group of VC would jeopardize our cordon and search of the large village of Binba. It turned out that the VC were just rubber tree tappers heading home, and thankfully, they didn't seem to notice us. We applied the many lessons we learned from Duc Mai, and by 5:30 a.m., the cordon was in place and secured, 25 minutes before dawn. We benefited from the moonlight and clear rubber terrain. We moved through the plantation and, without firing a single shot, apprehended and interrogated 169 men of military age. Among them, 17 were confirmed Viet Cong, and 77 were identified as suspects. Route 2 was opened for civilian travel to Ba Ria, allowing the province chief to establish a Vietnamese military presence in Bin Ba. Until the provincial reconnaissance unit was ready, we left one of our companies at Bin Ba. Eventually, Captain Ron Boxall from our team acted as the commander and advisor to this non-ARVN unit. His replacement was an ARVN unit that was later guided by another officer, Captain Ron Bade. Boxall's group consisted of armed civilians, mainly Montagnards and Nungs, who were recruited, armed, funded by a CIA agency involved in irregular military operations in Phuoc Tuy province. Bade's team, on the other hand, was an ARVN regional force company sent by Captain Bay, the district chief of Duc Thang. Boxall and Bade share their stories in Chapter 11. By the end of November, AATTV members took over Bade's responsibilities. 5 RAR remained in Bin Ba for several days after the cordon and search. During this time, we secured Route 2 for civilian traffic to Ba Ria and engaged in civil affairs to support the local people. We formed a strong relationship with the local Vietnamese Catholic priest and the French managers of the rubber plantation, whose lives under the VC must have been tough. We successfully moved a large stockpile of treated rubber down the road to Ba Ria. We also established contact with the isolated ARVN outpost at Duc Than north of Bin Ba and met the very isolated U.S. Army advisor, Major Bill Prescott, stationed there. We then visited the large Vietnamese Catholic village of Bin Gia, located further northeast of Duc Tan, where we established important connections with the village leaders. It was a busy and fruitful period. Before heading back to Nui Dat, we were given the task of investigating an intelligence report about a VC headquarters located east of Bin Ba. We searched the area for several days but found no signs of VC presence. During this search, I took a flight to Duc Tan to update Bill Prescott on our findings, ensuring that his team would stay safe. While in his office, I noticed his battle map on the wall. A large red arrow marked on the map showed the movements of VC troops, starting from the VC-controlled Maytao Mountains in the far northeast of the province, moving south and then west toward Nui Dat. I inquired about the source of this information and its accuracy. He stated it came from the provincial ARVN HQ in Bahria, where one ATF had a liaison officer, and he trusted its validity. I quickly returned to our base headquarters and got in touch with one ATF. It turned out they were aware of the report, but questioned its source. Given the many false alarms we had faced, their skepticism was understandable. Yet, that very night, on August 16th and 17th, 1966, the 1 ATF base came under significant mortar, recoilless rifle, and light artillery fire from the east, resulting in 24 wounded, including 2 seriously injured. The 1 ATF artillery reacted with counterfire, and the following morning, on August 17th, 6 RAR sent out patrols to find the enemy positions. 5 RR minus C Company, which stayed at Binba, was recalled to Nui Dat as soon as we concluded our search for a VCHQ east of Binba. We returned to Nui Dat on the afternoon of August 18th, just as D Company, 6 RR, was heavily engaged at the beginning of the Battle of Long Tan. The next day, I flew over the battlefield in a Sioux light observation helicopter, while our OC of D Company, Major Paul Greenhalgh, and his men were under the command of 6 RR for the battlefield clearance. The landscape resembled the devastated fields of France during the First World War, with shattered trees, torn-up ground, and desolation enveloping the small area where D Company, 6 RR, had made their stand. It was a sobering but thrilling sight, knowing that despite being outnumbered, the VC had suffered a significant defeat. Following Long Tan, the pursuit of the retreating enemy was hindered by other credible VC main force threats to both Nui Dat and Binba. At that time, we didn't have enough strength on the ground to pursue and defend simultaneously, leading the Americans to initiate a lengthy operation called Toledo, in which 5 RR later participated. We named our initial involvement Operation Darlinghurst and set out on August 26th for 5 days of operations in coordination with U.S. forces to our north. We meticulously searched areas to the north and then east of the 1 ATF base, before heading south to Long Tan and finally returning home. We didn't encounter any Viet Cong or fire our weapons, but we did find some mass graves, and the presence of abandoned gear and ammunition suggested a rapid enemy retreat. On September 2nd, we set out again for Operation Toledo, taking up a blocking position to the west of Binba while U.S. forces swept through an area to our north. We patrolled extensively around Nui Ngay, a region we knew well, where we managed to kill 2 VC and capture one who was trying to flee the Americans. Despite our efforts, we felt the results were lacking, and we returned to base on September 8th, feeling quite exhausted and frustrated. Our return from Operation Toledo allowed the 6th Battalion Royal Australian Regiment to launch their Operation Vaucluse in the Nui Din Hills from September 8th to 24th. We fell back into our routine, with one company on standby as immediate reserve, another securing 6 RR's base at Nui Dat, ongoing patrols within the 1 ATF tactical area of responsibility, and continued development of our base area. During this time, we conducted several one-day company-sized county fair operations, where we provided cordons while the ARVN searched the designated areas. We also undertook a roadrunner operation with APC-mounted infantry along Route 44 down to Long Hai, demonstrating to the VC and local population that we could freely use the road whenever we chose. There was no pause in our activities. After 6 RAR returned to Nui Dat, we launched Operation Crow's Nest on October 1st to follow up on information from a VC soldier of the 274th Regiment who had surrendered at Bin Jia on September 28th. We spent 3 days setting up a small command element within the Duc Tan compound, hosted by Captain B, the district chief, and his U.S. Army advisor, Major Bill Prescott. Meanwhile, 2 of our companies and their supporting APCs searched areas to the north around a village called Ngai Giao, which was outside the northern limits of the 1 ATF Tower and hadn't been searched before. While we didn't engage any elements of the 274th Regiment, D Company unfortunately lost Private Graham Warburton to a sniper. We did discover a cache containing over 6 tons of rice and a hoard of meat. which we confiscated and gave to Captain B for distribution to those in need in his area. We then withdrew as we prepared for our involvement in a major U.S. operation, codenamed Robin, along Route 15, the main road linking Vung Tau and Saigon. Robert O'Neill and Peter Isaacs, war is an unending human endeavor, playing out both day and night. We often remember the daytime events of war for their striking and dramatic nature. Most war movies and media focus on these daylight actions rather than nocturnal activities. However, battles don't pause after sunset. At night, our troops ventured from their secure positions to patrol diligently, either sneaking around to gather intelligence or boldly asserting control over the battlefield to confound and demoralize the enemy. During the Vietnam War, Australian night operations encompassed patrolling, ambushing, and tactical moves like setting up cordons or stealthily entering new areas. As illustrated in several chapters of this book, the physical and mental fatigue faced by battalion members was a burden they accepted as part of their reality. When not advancing at night, whether in the field or back at base, each section and platoon assigned several soldiers to sentry duty around the clock. Those on night patrols rarely found time for rest. They remained ever vigilant. While on patrol, most of them stood, crouched, or moved cautiously, straining to catch any signs of enemy movement among the trees, rocks, or across open terrain ahead. When they spotted potential threats, they had to decide whether to stay hidden or to move stealthily before launching an offensive against any intruders in our operational area. Always in their minds was the risk of encountering misinformed friendly forces or innocent civilians, just as much as the enemy. For a small group of us, the three captains at the BHQ, Peter Isaacs, the adjutant, Brian Ledan, the signals officer, and I, the intelligence officer, the nights brought additional responsibilities. We served as the available pool of BHQ command post duty officers. To allow the commanding officer and operations officer some uninterrupted sleep when BHQ was not active at night, we split the time from stand-down after sunset, around 8:30 p.m., until stand-to before dawn, around 5 a.m., into 3 shifts of about 3 hours each. Any action that occurred during those hours when we were responsible for the battalion, any incidents were reported via radio to whoever among us was on duty. Our first instinct was to decide whether to wake the CO or Max Carroll to take charge of the situation. Most reports we received were minor contacts or observation updates, so we often let our superiors continue their rest. However, there were instances of medium or serious clashes or ambushes where our troops needed artillery or mortar support. In those cases, we would first consult Max, who would decide whether to handle it himself or call the CO. When the battalion headquarters went on operations outside the Nui Dot base area, our command post typically consisted of 2 parallel trenches, each about 2 meters long and half a meter deep. The ground in between was used for laying out maps, logbooks, and radio equipment. At night, we had a basic shelter that was supposed to be light-proof and waterproof to protect the duty officer and signalers. During stand-to periods, the CO, Max, and the radio operator connecting us to 1 ATF HQ would squeeze into that confined space. We used hand torches for light, usually with red lenses to reduce visibility amid the surrounding green foliage. Nearby, the commander of our supporting artillery battery and the mortar platoon commander, along with their signalers, occupied a similar trench. Occasionally, we'd set up the command post inside an abandoned building or an armored command vehicle, and on one memorable occasion, in a borrowed U.S. Army air-conditioned caravan. This system worked quite well at night, but it took a toll on our daytime energy until we managed to get away for a couple of days and catch up on some much-needed sleep. We weren't the only ones in the battalion feeling the effects of daytime fatigue. It was a common challenge we all had to navigate because we needed to be sharp both day and night. Returning to the peacetime routine in Australia was a welcome relief in many ways. Max Carroll and Peter Isaacs, who transitioned to the Australian Army from the British Army, felt lucky to be part of such an exceptional battalion, a sentiment echoed throughout the entire 5RAR. Despite the challenges of being at the forefront of 1 ATF from the very beginning, the camaraderie was strong. Despite earlier shortages and oversights, along with the need to find solutions for unexpected operational challenges. The battalion's morale remained strong after 4 tough months of service. John War had undeniably created an impressive, fierce fighting battalion that filled us all with pride. This chapter has outlined 5RAR's initial engagements with the unique blend of military and civilian elements of operations in Vietnam. Out of necessity, this blend quickly evolved into various operational forms, leading to the development of initiative-driven systems for problem-solving and improvisation. This became the prevailing approach during 5RAR's initial deployment as part of the first wave of 1ATF's battalions in Phuoc Tuy. The next chapter will explore how the growing presence of 1ATF impacted both the VC and the local civilian population, as well as the role of intelligence in shaping our interactions with these groups. If you're interested in uncovering what official histories overlook, the human cost of command, the late-night decisions, and the battlefield ingenuity of Australia's 5RR, subscribe now. What are your thoughts? Did our soldiers receive the support they genuinely required?